In the weeks leading up to the launch of Dead Space 2, I thought I should play the first game to get to grips with the story and feel for the game. So my first experience would be of what my friends at the time were saying about the game, telling me of their experiences. However, that will be a story for another time, perhaps in the next video. But in this one, I will be sharing with you what direction I would have taken in the second installment for Dead Space. Don't get me wrong, I think Dead Space 2 is still a great game, with its fair share of flaws within the story and multiplayer side of things, but I would like to give my own perspective on how Dead Space 2 could have still been a worthy horror sequel rather than the action gun-ho experience I experienced while being inside of the first days of a necromorph outbreak on Titan Station. I won't be going through the entire story with the changes I would make, but this will give you the general idea of how you could really serve horror. So, let's begin, shall we? In Dead Space, you are playing as an engineer Isaac Clarke travelling to Aegis 7 following a rather short Mayday call that was sent by the USG Ishimura within an outbreak of some kind. In the beginning, the game doesn't really give you any indicators of what is happening, but as Kendra would tell Hammond about the running lights and the noises coming from the open transmission, this would relay information to the player that something is off within the scenario we find ourselves within. Things would get even eerier as we travel or crash into the hangar bay, with the only other characters being present are our companions that we met a few moments ago. Again, Hammond would state that a security detail would be present inside of the lounge area, but we haven't seen anyone, just random luggage. As we make our way towards our first objective to activate the diagnostics panel, we can then see blood on the floor again, reinforcing the idea that something has gone wrong. The player would probably be thinking or wondering what has happened to the crew at this point, if they haven't already asked that question before. But they wouldn't have long to wait until the game presents us, the player, with evidence of what's happened to the crew when the necromorphs arrive, greeting us with a chase sequence that is ended when the player navigates inside of the elevator. But when the doors close, this is where we would normally feel safe, given it to be any other horror title at this time. However, a necromorph would rip open the door, and as a game over screen was looking to become a true possibility, the elevator crushes the monster before slowly descending into the dark depths of the flight deck. This serves to be an introduction to the game, giving us all the basic information that we need along with setting up the horror before throwing you into the action. But why am I talking about Dead Space when the topic is Dead Space 2? Well, this is to serve as the baseline for the introduction, and for my version of the second game to be a worthy substitute, we need to play heavily into what made the first game's introduction so good. The environmental storytelling, along with the snippets of dialogue we get that relays the information that would be provided by the characters' exchanges in a natural way, like how we would talk to normal people within our day-to-day lives. The community seems to like Isaac quite a bit in the second game, but I'm going to suggest playing as someone who was featured in a prequel to Dead Space 2. That's right, Franco. The reason for this will come into play later on. My sequel would start way before the outbreak has even begun, being a day prior to Dead Space Mobile. Why exactly? Well, in Dead Space we were traveling to a location that had been rocked by a hurricane, with our experience being similar to how we would feel traveling through a town that has been destroyed, with echoes of the past events being plastered all over the environment. With the second game, we are in the eye of the storm, allowing us to witness the chaos and carnage a necromorph outbreak would bring about. In the case of this being a horror sequel, we need to set it up as such. So, as Franco, we would be traveling through the public sector on our way to our first task to do some maintenance at a store inside of the concourse. Then we would go throughout some of the key areas like the transport hub, CEC facility, garbage disposal, medical center, etc. All the while Franco would have a few snippets of dialogue with some characters and overhearing people whispering and gossiping about the Ishimura, Aegis 7, and of Isaac. All of this would relay information to the player of the previous game and the events that took place. And it would also be nice to see an old report of the Aegis 7 news bulletin we saw from Aftermath. This would also give us an opportunity to show the player the beauty of the scenes and sights of the sprawl, seeing how the public would interact with the world and themselves, and along with us being present within it, effectively installing the horror factor later on, as we can see how the public sector would function in its day-to-day life, along with its fair share of hardships before all hell breaks loose. At this point, we would get one last job to complete, taking us into the Church of Unitology, where we would get some snippets of dialogue and some whispers of the holy relic inside of the government sector, and after completing the objective, we would be brought into a meeting with the Overseer, seen in Dead Space Aftermath, which looks to be a ceremony of some kind, and as it would come to a close, we would be presented with robes and a ring, and two individuals would come out of the shadows to put these on Franco, and as they do this, the Overseer, followed by the crowds, would start uttering, "Altman be praised," repeating as the camera slowly moves away from Franco, pulling back, and as the crowds continue with "Altman be praised," the speech would start to become more like a chant as the world fades into darkness, giving us the title card, Dead Space 2. I think this would be a real epic way to give us the introduction and allows us to see more of the church and how the Unitologists would function in their lives, giving us more of an insight, building on what had came before. The next chapter would fade in with a similar objective from the prologue, allowing us to go into the hospital to do some repairs to certain areas of the medical center. This is where we would overhear two doctors having a conversation about the Aegis incident, stating that their patient, Isaac, that his recollection of the events contradict the story given to the public by the government. You overhear this from a separate room while finishing up a repair job, giving the player more insight into the plot and foreshadowing the corruption of the Earth government, especially when they get caught and dragged away, kicking and shouting, telling them that they won't say anything to them, replying that, "No, you won't. We will be sure of that." Shortly after departing the medical center, Dana would contact you, further congratulating you on your higher role within their order. Dialogue would be exchanged as you travel. Dana would inform you of a repair task that she needs to have completed, so that the next step in her plan is to continue. Franco would accept and begin traveling to the crossover tube nearby. Your objective would be to open the crossover tube from the public sector's side and travel to the midsection to repair some of the tracks. As you go inside though, this is where the necromorphs would be introduced to the player. As soon as you get to the location of the repairs that are needed to take place, Franco would start to hear distant roars and squishy footsteps traveling towards his location, rapidly repeating and getting faster and faster Your next objective would be clear: to find somewhere to hide before finding out what is coming towards you. From the hiding spot, we would get a cutscene of Franco pulling up a security feed of the tubes, with the lights flickering, and in the spots of light, we can see a horde of necromorphs piling through the hallway, going straight for the public sector. Franco would see the power levels in this area are fluctuating, so you would need to repair them, so that you can warn the church of the imminent danger fast approaching them. However, a betrayal would occur with Dana, similar to the first chapter of Dead Space Mobile, where she tells you to let the creatures kill Franco, that he will be reborn as a foot soldier of divinity, that he shouldn't be afraid of accepting his fate, as it was all planned eons prior to their existence. Franco would not even be able to comprehend what he was hearing at this point. Instead of being angry like Vandal does get, he starts to break down, asking how the hell is he going to survive this ordeal. This is where a figure would step out of the shadows. The figure would tell him to get a grip. There is still work to be done before the end. And before he could look to where the voice was coming from, the figure would disappear into the shadows once more. As Franco rises to his feet, he would hear a whisper telling him to find the one from before, the conscript of the marker. Franco wouldn't understand this, but he would be determined to help the public find safety. However, in the chaos, the door you entered had become damaged, so you'll need to find another way out of here, which would take you into the CEC facility, where you would find a way to combat the necromorphs, the infamous plasma cutter. On your travels, you would hear transmissions playing out over the speakers, screaming about the necromorphs' presence within the sector, seeing bodies littering the corridors, severed legs and arms in some of the corridors, subtly informing the player the severity of the threat unleashed. This area would serve to be a tutorial area on how to combat the necromorphs, with a transmission informing the workers to dismember the creatures in order to stop them. The end of the first chapter would be when Franco was to make it to the transport hub, only to see the once vibrant location has quickly turned into one of panic and horror, nearly becoming unrecognizable from what it once was. Instead of the mindless chatter, screams now filled the air as the necromorphs begin hunting the civilians, adding them to their ranks. From here, you'll see security forces attempting to defeat the Scourge, some succeeding, but most being torn apart. From here, you would have moments where you could use the security forces to your own advantage, with some areas housing more powerful variants of the necromorphs. You could either help the officers or sneak past the carnage. However, both would have equal consequences, as the officers would help you by giving you either supplies to aid you in your journey or keycards to access certain locations, housing new weapon schematics or suits. Helping them may result in biting off a bit more than you can chew though, so choose wisely. The next chapter would task you with getting to the security headquarters. However, through the chaos, this would never happen, as the crowds rushing to where you have just come from would push you back in a cutscene, with an emergency lockdown being issued afterwards, making your progress even harder, especially when necromorphs start to assault the area you are in, with them pouring out of vents, assassinating the terrified and unarmed civilians as they claw their way towards you. You would kill them, and then you would look for an alternate route, but not before walking past all of the people you failed to save, further cementing that fear of being powerless to save anyone. Moving into the apartment complexes, you would look up to see a man in an engineering suit running away on a platform above, looking crazed, screaming, "Leave me be, please." However, you can't see anything or anyone giving chase. Franco would shrug this off before hearing that familiar whisper again, implying that the man he just saw was Isaac Clarke, the conscript of the marker. As you make it to the headquarters of Sector Security, you hear a disturbance on the other side of the doors. Reluctantly, Franco would open these doors, transitioning into Chapter 3, where you travel through the headquarters hoping to find someone in charge, someone that could help you in your struggle. However, all you find are blood trails, corpses, and echoes of past humanity littering the quarters. As all hope seemed to have faded out, a bleeping can be heard in the offices. Franco would press a button to overhear a transmission being played out with a group of soldiers requesting assistance in the Cassini Towers complex. Seeing a glimmer of hope, Franco would link up with their rigs and tell them that he is on his way. And that is all I have at this point in time, but there is still one thing left to be clarified before moving on. Is that the repair jobs would be like the minigames, but a mix between the ones in Extraction and Bioshock, not rewiring panels, just so that you actually feel like you are repairing something, not twiddling your thumbs like an actual puzzle is to be solved here. The type of horror I wanted to go for was building the world through the player's eyes, only for the society within the world to crumble within a couple of days' time. The prologue and half of Chapter 1 would give the player enough time to develop an emotional connection to some of the locations, especially seeing the residents, whether those be the elderly, children, or young adults, or even the middle-aged, how they would interact with each other in a peaceful time before the chaos of the outbreak would occur. However, my version would not be perfect, but I can safely say it would be a lot more horrific than the first. But if you would like me to continue diving into what could have been, then please hit the like button. Let me know in the comments what you thought and what I should do, and I look forward to hearing from you. Sign up to join the British Alliance today by subscribing and ringing in the notification bell for all updates, and I will see all of you within the cosmos, and be sure to have a good one.